Did you know that certain so-called healthy nuts might be silently destroying your muscle gains? That's right. While nuts have been praised for their protein and healthy fats, not all nuts are created equal, and some may be actively working against your efforts to stay strong, lean, and functional. In today's video, we're diving deep into 7 nuts you should never eat if you're trying to fight off muscle loss, build strength, or recover from exercise. You'll learn the metabolic truth behind nut consumption and how the wrong choices can increase inflammation, block absorption of key nutrients, and slow your muscle regeneration process. Let's clear the confusion and help your body return to an optimal anabolic state. Nuts have long been praised for their convenience, nutritional density, and heart-healthy fats, but not all nuts are beneficial when consumed regularly, especially those high in omega-6 fatty acids. While omega-6s are technically essential fats, meaning our bodies cannot produce them on their own and we must obtain them through food, the real danger lies in the disproportionate imbalance between omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids in the modern diet. Ideally, our ancestors evolved on a ratio close to 1:1 or 2:1 omega-6 to omega-3, which supported an anti-Semitic internal environment. However, today's dietary patterns often exceed a 20:1 ratio, with omega-6s dominating every aspect of food, from industrial seed oils to nut-based snacks. Many commonly consumed nuts, including peanuts, cashews, walnuts, pine nuts, and sunflower seeds, are alarmingly high in omega-6 fatty acids, particularly linoleic acid. When consumed in excess, linoleic acid gets incorporated into cell membranes and becomes highly susceptible to oxidation. This process generates inflammatory compounds such as oxidized linoleic acid metabolites, XLAMs, which have been linked to the pathogenesis of nearly every chronic condition, from atherosclerosis and autoimmune disorders to metabolic dysfunction and accelerated aging. In the context of muscle preservation and sarcopenia, this chronic low-grade inflammation becomes a silent enemy. Inflammation interferes with the anabolic signaling pathways necessary for muscle protein synthesis. It disrupts insulin sensitivity, blunts the release of growth hormone and IGF-1, and ultimately creates a catabolic state that favors muscle breakdown over growth and repair. As people age, they naturally lose muscle mass due to hormonal changes and decreased physical activity. But high dietary omega-6 intake exacerbates this decline by keeping the body in a persistent inflammatory state that prevents muscle recovery even after exercise or adequate protein intake. Furthermore, omega-6 overload affects mitochondrial function, reducing cellular energy production and leading to increased fatigue and reduced exercise tolerance. The mitochondria are the powerhouses of muscle cells, and their ability to efficiently utilize fat and glucose for fuel is essential for endurance, strength, and repair. Unfortunately, oxidized fatty acids disrupt mitochondrial membranes and lead to leakage of reactive oxygen species, ROS, which further damages tissues and initiates a vicious cycle of oxidative stress. This is particularly concerning for individuals trying to maintain lean muscle mass through strength training, as the inflammatory load from omega-6 rich nuts can cancel out much of the benefit gained from physical exertion. Additionally, many high omega-6 nuts are consumed in roasted or flavored form, which compounds the issue. Roasting nuts at high temperatures oxidizes their delicate fats, transforming them into harmful trans fats and aldehydes, highly inflammatory substances that cause further damage to arterial walls, brain tissue, and skeletal muscle. Flavored nuts, especially those with added sugars or industrial oils, act like metabolic landmines, driving up insulin, aggravating the gut lining, and burdening the liver. Over time, these effects compromise nutrient absorption and hormone conversion, particularly testosterone and DHEA, both of which are critical for muscle maintenance and metabolic health. The problem is further intensified when individuals eat these omega-6 heavy nuts mindlessly throughout the day under the false assumption that they're healthy snacks. This daily accumulation of oxidized fats and inflammatory precursors slowly dismantles the body's ability to detoxify, regenerate, and stay hormonally balanced. Even moderate amounts, when consumed consistently in an already imbalanced dietary framework, can tip the scale towards systemic inflammation. Moreover, these omega-6 dense nuts often outcompete other fat-soluble nutrients such as vitamin E, which is needed to protect cells from oxidative damage. When too many omega-6s are present, vitamin E stores are depleted and the antioxidant shield is lost, leading to further degradation of muscle tissue and an increased susceptibility to exercise-induced muscle soreness, delayed recovery, and joint discomfort. What many people don't realize is that chronic inflammation also affects mental focus, sleep quality, and immune resilience, all of which indirectly affect muscle repair and metabolic regulation. Even the gut microbiome is altered by a diet rich in omega-6s, fostering the growth of pro-similarial bacterial strains that disrupt nutrient absorption and stimulate immune overactivity. The body becomes trapped in a state of metabolic chaos, where no amount of protein, exercise, or supplements can effectively restore balance until the root cause, omega-6 dominance, is addressed. It's not about demonizing all fats or even all nuts. It's about being strategic and informed. Reducing or eliminating high omega-6 nuts from your diet can help reestablish hormonal equilibrium, lower systemic inflammation, enhance anabolic signaling, and protect the hard-earned muscle mass that becomes increasingly precious with age. Nuts are often marketed as nutrient-dense superfoods, loaded with healthy fats, protein, fiber, and minerals. But what many people don't realize is that certain nuts also carry a hidden burden. Anti-nutrients, compounds that can quietly sabotage digestion, nutrient absorption, hormonal balance, and even muscle development over time. Anti-nutrients are naturally occurring plant compounds that serve a protective function for the plant itself, shielding seeds and nuts from predators in the wild. However, when consumed by humans in large amounts or on a regular basis, these compounds can interfere with the body's ability to absorb essential minerals, break down protein efficiently, and maintain metabolic health. Some of the most problematic anti-nutrients found in nuts include phytic acid, oxalates, lectins, and enzyme inhibitors. And the nuts with the highest loads of these compounds often overlap with those most commonly consumed in health circles. Take phytic acid, for example. This is one of the most prominent anti-nutrients in nuts, especially almonds, walnuts, cashews, and hazelnuts. While it acts as a storage form of phosphorus in plants, in the human body, it binds tightly to essential minerals like zinc, magnesium, iron, and calcium, making them biologically unavailable. That means you could be eating a high magnesium diet on paper, but if phytic acid is present in every handful of nuts you consume, that magnesium is simply passing through your system unused. For muscle repair and strength building, this is a serious issue. Magnesium is required for ATP production, nerve signaling, muscle contraction, and protein synthesis. Zinc, another mineral hijacked by phytic acid, is critical for testosterone production and tissue regeneration. Without adequate bioavailability of these minerals, even the best workout and supplement protocols will stall. Oxalates are another stealthy threat hiding in nuts like almonds and cashews. These compounds can form calcium oxalate crystals, especially in the kidneys and joints. Over time, this contributes to kidney stone formation and chronic joint inflammation, both of which can impair movement, exercise consistency, and muscle growth. Oxalates also interfere with calcium absorption, further weakening the skeletal system that's essential for supporting lean muscle. As oxalate accumulation builds up in the tissues, it creates a chronic inflammatory environment that leads to fatigue, stiffness, and immune dysfunction, conditions that keep the body in a catabolic rather than anabolic muscle-building state. Another anti-nutrient present in many nuts is lectins, carbohydrate-binding proteins that resist digestion and can bind to the lining of the gut. Lectins can act like sandpaper on the intestinal wall, triggering inflammation, increasing intestinal permeability, leaky gut, and setting off immune responses that lead to food sensitivities, brain fog, and systemic inflammation. Lectins are particularly high in peanuts, which are technically legumes, but often consumed like tree nuts. When the gut lining is compromised, not only does nutrient absorption suffer, but the production of neurotransmitters, hormones, and digestive enzymes is disrupted. This cascade weakens the hormonal signals necessary for muscle repair, testosterone synthesis, and insulin regulation, all of which are vital for retaining muscle mass as we age. Enzyme inhibitors are yet another category of anti-nutrients found in nuts. These compounds interfere with the function of digestive enzymes like amylase, trypsin, and lipase enzymes required to break down carbohydrates, proteins, and fats respectively. When enzyme inhibitors block digestion, it leads to bloating, nutrient malabsorption, and undigested food particles entering the bloodstream. The result is an inflammatory immune response that taxes the liver, elevates cortisol, and throws the body into a stress state, again, encouraging the breakdown of muscle tissue rather than building it. Over time, this also leads to chronic fatigue, brain fog, and difficulty maintaining a healthy metabolism, especially in individuals over 40 who are already dealing with slower digestion and reduced enzyme output. It's important to note that roasting and dry processing nuts often fails to neutralize these anti-nutrients, and in some cases, it can even make them more reactive. Commercial nuts are rarely soaked or sprouted, which are traditional methods used to reduce anti-nutrient content and improve digestibility. Unfortunately, most people consuming handfuls of healthy trail mix daily have no idea they're introducing this toxic load repeatedly into their gut and metabolic system. For individuals trying to combat sarcopenia, insulin resistance, low testosterone, or adrenal fatigue, this is a metabolic disaster hiding in plain sight. In the context of muscle preservation and functional aging, the anti-nutrient load from nuts can act like a slow metabolic poison, disrupting mineral absorption, impairing digestion, lowering testosterone, increasing inflammation, and blocking the anabolic pathways that are essential for staying strong, lean, and energized. When people reach for a handful of nuts thinking they're grabbing a clean snack or a healthy dose of protein and fat, they often overlook one of the most overlooked dangers lurking beneath the surface: mold contamination and the toxic byproducts known as aflatoxins. These invisible threats are not just minor contaminants, they're biologically active toxic compounds produced by mold species like Aspergillus flavus and Aspergillus parasiticus, which commonly grow on certain nuts under warm, humid, or poorly stored conditions. Aflatoxins are classified by the World Health Organization as Group 1 carcinogens, meaning there is substantial evidence they can cause cancer in humans. But beyond that, they also have profound negative impacts on liver function, hormone regulation, immune integrity, and muscle metabolism, especially when consumed chronically, even in small amounts. Peanuts, often mistaken as a nut but technically a legume, are one of the worst offenders. Due to their growth underground and their high oil content, peanuts are incredibly susceptible to mold growth during both harvesting and storage. Once aflatoxins take hold, they are almost impossible to destroy. They are resistant to high heat, drying, and many traditional cooking methods. This means your roasted, salted peanut snack might still harbor these toxins unless it has undergone rigorous testing, which is not standard across the industry. Over time, aflatoxins burden the liver, the body's primary detoxification organ. The liver is responsible for metabolizing hormones like testosterone, cortisol, and estrogen, all of which are tightly connected to muscle maintenance, fat storage, and overall metabolic function. A compromised liver can't efficiently convert inactive hormones into their active forms, leading to fatigue, muscle wasting, and hormonal imbalance, particularly in aging adults. It's not just peanuts. Pistachios, almonds, Brazil nuts, and walnuts, all popular in various health-conscious diets, can also harbor aflatoxins if improperly harvested, stored, or transported. These nuts are often imported from regions with high humidity, like South America, Southeast Asia, or Africa, where Post-harvest mold contamination is difficult to control. Even organic nuts, if not stringently monitored and tested, can become a breeding ground for mycotoxins, especially when purchased in bulk bins where airflow and moisture control are minimal. Once aflatoxins are in your system, they don't just damage the liver, they're immunosuppressive, meaning they weaken the immune system's ability to fight off inflammation, infections, and even cancer cells. This low-grade immune disruption drains energy, increases stress hormones, and prevents the body from entering the anabolic, muscle-building state it needs to thrive, particularly in men and women over the age of 40 who are already facing age muscle decline. Another layer to this problem is that aflatoxins are fat soluble, which means they accumulate in fatty tissues over time, including the liver, brain, and even fat cells. This accumulation creates a toxic burden on the body that's hard to eliminate. The presence of these toxins can interfere with mitochondrial function, the very engines of your cells that produce energy. ATP, when mitochondria are stressed or damaged, energy production plummets. Muscle repair slows, and fatigue becomes chronic. The more toxic the internal environment, the harder it is for the body to recover from exercise, build lean mass, or maintain metabolic flexibility, which is the body's ability to burn both fat and glucose efficiently. Even more concerning is the synergistic toxicity of aflatoxins when combined with a high-carb or high-fructose diet, which many people unknowingly pair with nuts in snack bars, trail mixes, and granola blends. Fructose overconsumption alone burdens the liver, but when combined with aflatoxins, it creates a perfect storm of inflammation, insulin resistance, and oxidative stress. Over time, this leads to elevated liver enzymes, poor glucose control, and reduced testosterone levels. 3 critical markers that directly influence muscle health, fat storage, and aging. In the context of sarcopenia, the age loss of muscle mass, aflatoxin exposure is a silent but deadly accelerant. It undermines every pillar required to sustain muscle: hormonal balance, detoxification, mitochondrial function, protein synthesis, and recovery. Unfortunately, aflatoxin contamination is rarely discussed in mainstream nutritional conversations, yet it's highly prevalent in commercial nut products, especially those that are roasted and flavored with sweeteners or coatings. These additional processing steps often mask the taste or smell of rancidity or mold, making it nearly impossible for the average consumer to detect contamination. What's even more alarming is that the FDA does allow trace amounts of aflatoxins in food products under safe limits, but no level of a known carcinogen should ever be considered truly safe for regular consumption, especially for individuals with compromised liver function, sluggish detox pathways, autoimmune disorders, or muscle wasting concerns. To reduce exposure, consumers should opt for organic, raw, and preferably sprouted nuts that have been stored in vacuum-sealed or airtight containers. Ideally, sourcing from trusted suppliers who test for aflatoxins is key. Refrigeration or freezing of bulk nuts can also reduce mold growth. But even with all these precautions, the takeaway is clear. Chronic, repeated exposure to moldy nuts and aflatoxins is a hidden factor in muscle loss, energy decline, and hormonal disruption, and needs to be taken seriously by anyone trying to improve body composition. When it comes to snacking, most people assume that nuts, regardless of how they're prepared, are a healthy, blood sugar-friendly choice. But the reality is far more complex, especially when it comes to flavored or glazed nuts, which are often marketed as guilt-free, yet secretly packed with ingredients that disrupt metabolic health. The biggest concern here isn't the nut itself, but what's added to it. Sugar, honey, syrups, maltodextrin, and artificial sweeteners that convert what should be a slow fat-based snack into a high glycemic, insulin-spiking trap. This insulin spike does more than temporarily affect blood sugar. It sets off a chain reaction that can damage metabolism, block fat burning, and even accelerate muscle loss, especially if this kind of snacking becomes a daily habit. Insulin is the master storage hormone. Its job is to shuttle nutrients, especially glucose, out of the bloodstream and into the cells for energy or storage. But when insulin is elevated repeatedly, such as after eating sweetened nuts or glazed nut snacks, the body is constantly pushed into storage mode, which means it's far less likely to burn fat for fuel. The result? fatigue, brain fog, inflammation, and over time, insulin resistance, which is one of the root drivers of type 2 diabetes, belly fat accumulation, and muscle degradation. What makes this worse is that many people eat flavored nuts between meals or late at night, thinking they're eating clean, not realizing they're triggering insulin surges during times when the body is meant to be in a fat-burning anabolic state, particularly during fasting or sleep. Let's break down exactly what happens when you consume these sweetened nuts. Take honey roasted almonds or candied pecans, for example. Not only do they contain added sugar, but they often include corn syrup, solids, dextrose, sucrose, and even partially hydrogenated oils. These ingredients push the glycemic index of the snack far higher than plain nuts, meaning the body responds with a sharp insulin release. This rise in insulin doesn't just handle the incoming sugar, it suppresses the fat-burning hormone glucagon, increases hunger within an hour or two, and encourages the body to convert any extra calories into abdominal fat, which is metabolically active and inflammatory. Over time, repeated exposure to these spikes creates a hormonal environment hostile to muscle retention, particularly in aging adults who already face declining insulin sensitivity and slower metabolism. Another lesser-known consequence of this insulin surge is its effect on growth hormone, GH, and testosterone, two critical hormones needed to preserve and build lean muscle tissue. Elevated insulin suppresses both. That means even if someone is exercising, doing resistance training, or trying to fast for metabolic health, those insulin spikes from glazed nuts could be silently sabotaging their efforts. And since nuts are often perceived as a safe food, they may be consumed mindlessly, especially in trail mixes or snack bags where portion control is lost and the sugar load builds up fast. Just a handful of sweetened nuts can contain 10-15 grams of sugar, which is enough to drive significant insulin elevation and negate the metabolic benefits of an otherwise low-carb day. Even more troubling is the hidden presence of maltodextrin in many commercial nut products, used as a coating agent or carrier for flavors. Maltodextrin has a glycemic index higher than table sugar, meaning it spikes blood sugar and insulin rapidly, often without the consumer even realizing it, because it's not always labeled as sugar. This compound is particularly dangerous for individuals trying to manage blood sugar levels or combat early-stage insulin resistance, a condition that affects nearly 1 in 3 adults without any obvious symptoms. The combination of sugar and fat in these products also confuses the body metabolically, leading to a state where neither ketosis nor effective glucose metabolism is achieved, contributing to metabolic gridlock. Now, consider how this affects muscle health. In a healthy, insulin-sensitive individual, nutrients like amino acids, glucose, and fatty acids are directed into the right cells at the right time. But with insulin resistance, driven in part by these frequent sugar-laden snacks, the delivery of nutrients to muscle cells is impaired. Instead, energy gets shuttled into fat cells, while muscle cells are starved of the nutrients needed for recovery, repair, and growth. This nutrient misdirection accelerates sarcopenia, the gradual decline in muscle mass that begins in the 30s and rapidly worsens after 50. For people who are already struggling with belly fat, fatigue, poor sleep, or hormonal imbalances, these insulin-spiking nuts may be the hidden culprit keeping them stuck in a catabolic fat-storing mode. And let's not forget the psychological element. Sweetened nuts stimulate dopamine, a reward-based neurotransmitter, making these snacks addictive. What starts as a small treat can turn into a daily craving, creating a feedback loop of snacking, insulin spikes, crashes, and further craving. The body becomes conditioned to seek out sweetened fat combinations, which are evolutionarily rare and deeply reinforcing, making dietary control much harder. This further derails appetite regulation, metabolic health, and muscle preservation. The solution lies not just in choosing the right kind of nut, but how it's prepared and what it's coated with. The difference between raw almonds and honey glazed almonds isn't just a few calories. It's the difference between being in fat burning mode versus fat storing mode, between feeding muscle tissue or feeding inflammation. Polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs, have long been praised for their heart-healthy benefits, especially omega-3s like EPA and DHA from fish oil. But there's a hidden metabolic trap that few are talking about, and it's becoming a silent epidemic. When PUFAs are overconsumed, particularly the omega-6 types found abundantly in nuts, seeds, vegetable oils, and processed foods, the body is flooded with unstable fats that can wreak havoc on your mitochondrial, hormones, and cell membranes. This overload doesn't just affect your ability to burn fat or maintain energy. It can inhibit muscle growth, promote chronic inflammation, and accelerate aging at the cellular level. What many people fail to realize is that while some PUFAs are essential in trace amounts, the ratio and quantity are far more important than simply getting enough. Modern diets, especially those heavy in roasted nuts, seed oils, and processed snacks, can push PUFA intake into toxic ranges without you even realizing it. The issue isn't just the presence of omega-6s, but how unstable these fats are when exposed to light, heat, or oxygen. PUFAs have multiple double bonds, making them chemically fragile and prone to oxidation. When you overconsume PUFAs, your body stores them in fat tissue where they remain unstable and continue to produce lipid peroxides and free radicals, especially when under stress or during weight loss. This means that not only do these fats damage the cells they're stored in, but they also contribute to a constant state of oxidative stress, leading to mitochondrial dysfunction, poor muscle recovery, and sluggish metabolism. The body becomes inflamed from the inside out, and your ability to build lean muscle or stay in fat-burning mode becomes compromised, regardless of how clean your diet looks on the surface. And here's where it gets even more critical. Most nuts, seeds, and so-called healthy oils are loaded with omega-6 PUFAs, specifically linoleic acid, which is the most consumed fat in the modern diet. Foods like sunflower seeds, walnuts, peanuts, soybean oil, safflower oil, and even almonds are high in linoleic acid. This particular fatty acid, when overconsumed, directly suppresses mitochondrial respiration, the process by which your cells produce energy. So instead of boosting your energy levels with healthy fats, you're actually dampening cellular energy production, leading to fatigue, brain fog, and a weakened immune response. Muscle cells, which are especially energy hungry, suffer the most, resulting in poor protein synthesis, slower muscle recovery, and greater vulnerability to muscle wasting, particularly in aging adults already at risk for sarcopenia. Compounding the problem is the way these PUFA-rich foods are consumed. Many people snack on roasted nuts or use vegetable oils for cooking, not realizing that high heat further oxidizes these fats, creating toxic byproducts like aldehydes and acrolein, which are linked to inflammation, DNA damage, and even cancer. These compounds also disrupt gut microbiota and impair liver function, two key systems involved in nutrient absorption, detoxification, and hormonal regulation. So now, not only is your muscle tissue under attack from within, but your detox systems and digestion are being burdened by a constant influx of toxic fat metabolites. The result is a body that's inflamed, metabolically sluggish, and hormonally imbalanced, creating the perfect environment for fat storage and muscle breakdown. And what's even more deceptive is the marketing of PUFA-rich foods as heart-healthy or weight-loss-friendly. Just because a food is labeled as plant-based or rich in omega-3 doesn't mean it's metabolically supportive. Most of the omega-3s in nuts and seeds are in the form of ALA, alpha-linolenic acid, which the body poorly converts to EPA and DHA. Meanwhile, the excessive intake of linoleic acid goes unchecked, tipping the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio far out of balance. Historically, humans consumed omega-6 and omega-3 at a ratio of 1 or 2:1. Today, it's often 21 or even 31 in favor of omega-6, primarily due to the overconsumption of PUFA-rich snack foods and cooking oils. This imbalance alone is enough to hijack metabolic health, fuel joint pain, depress thyroid function, and trigger autoimmune flares in genetically susceptible individuals. And consider what happens when someone attempts to lose weight after years of PUFA overload. As fat cells are broken down during calorie restriction or fasting, they release stored linoleic acid and its oxidized byproducts into the bloodstream, triggering a toxic dump that overwhelms the liver and floods the body with inflammation. This is why some people feel worse during weight loss, experience plateaus, or suffer from energy crashes despite doing all the right thing. Their metabolic machinery is literally jammed up with unstable oxidized fats that were silently accumulating for years. Over time, this can even impair thyroid conversion, reduce insulin sensitivity, and blunt leptin signaling, making fat loss and muscle gain harder with each passing year. The key is not just reducing calories, but strategically lowering PUFA intake, especially from nuts, seed oils, and processed foods. Roasted nuts have become a staple snack for many who are trying to eat healthier, boost protein intake, or avoid refined carbohydrates. But there's a major problem hidden beneath their crunchy appeal. Most roasted nuts are cooked in highly toxic, inflammatory oils that silently erode metabolic health, damage your cells, and sabotage your muscle-building efforts. When you grab a bag of dry roasted almonds, peanuts, or cashews, chances are you're consuming more than just the nut itself. What's rarely disclosed, unless you study the fine print, is that these nuts are often coated in cheap vegetable oils like canola, soybean, sunflower, or cottonseed oil before roasting. These industrial seed oils are high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids, PEFUFs, which are incredibly unstable and easily oxidized during the roasting process. That oxidation leads to the formation of toxic compounds, lipid peroxides, aldehydes, and trans fats that your body must then try to detoxify. Over time, repeated exposure to these byproducts creates a chronic state of low-grade inflammation that interferes with muscle repair, insulin sensitivity, liver function, and even hormonal balance. Now consider the temperatures used in commercial nut roasting. Most nuts are roasted between 300 DEGF and 400 DEGF, 150, 200 DEG, and sometimes even higher. At these temperatures, the oils used to coat the nuts not only degrade rapidly, but the fats within the nuts themselves, especially their natural PUFAs, also oxidize. The problem compounds when nuts are roasted in batches, stored for long periods, then re-exposed to light, heat, and oxygen during shipping and storage. The oxidation process doesn't stop once the nuts are roasted. It continues slowly over time, meaning by the time they reach your shelf, they're often saturated with rancid fats and free radicals that can damage mitochondrial function and burden the immune system. You may think you're making a clean, smart dietary choice when in fact you're unknowingly consuming pro-salivatory fuel that blocks the pathways involved in fat burning, muscle synthesis, and hormonal optimization. And there's more. Many roasted nuts are also salted, sweetened, or flavored to enhance palatability, especially in mass market products. But here's the metabolic trap. These added ingredients often include refined sugars, artificial flavors, preservatives, and even MSG. Monosodium glutamate, which can spike insulin, stimulate cravings, and overburden your gut microbiome. Combined with the toxic seed oils and heat-damaged fats, you now have a product that promotes inflammation, glycation, and digestive disruption, all while offering very little usable nutrition. This is especially dangerous for those trying to build muscle, lose fat, or stabilize blood sugar, since the inflammatory load from these nuts directly interferes with glucose uptake, insulin signaling, and recovery pathways. Instead of fueling lean body mass, these snack foods push your system further into stress, making you feel more tired, bloated, and inflamed, even if you're eating within your calorie limit. What's often overlooked is how oxidized fats from roasted nuts affect your mitochondria, the tiny engines in your cells responsible for producing energy. These oxidized compounds damage the mitochondrial membrane, reduce ATP production, and generate more reactive oxygen species, ROS. This means your body has to allocate more resources just to repair this internal damage. Resources that should be used for muscle repair, detoxification, and immune resilience. Over time, this energy drain contributes to muscle fatigue, brain fog, slowed recovery after workouts, and even weight gain as the body struggles to maintain homeostasis in the face of a growing oxidative burden. And for those entering midlife or already experiencing signs of sarcopenia, the age loss of muscle mass, this kind of hidden dietary inflammation can accelerate muscle loss and metabolic decline, even if exercise and protein intake remain high. Even more alarming is the cumulative effect of these toxic oils and rancid fats. Eating roasted nuts occasionally might not create immediate symptoms, but daily consumption, especially in the context of a diet already rich in restaurant food, packaged snacks, or seed oil-based condiments, pushes the body into a chronic state of PUFA overload, where detox systems like the liver, lymphatic system, and GI tract become overburdened. This slows down bile flow, reduces fat-soluble vitamin absorption, and increases your risk of fatty liver, leaky gut, and thyroid dysfunction. And ironically, while nuts are often promoted as a good source of magnesium, zinc, or vitamin E, the oxidative damage from roasting can destroy these nutrients, making the final product not only inflammatory, but also nutritionally depleted. So even though the package says natural, heart healthy, or roasted to perfection, you're getting a snack that has more in common with ultra-processed junk food than with a clean, ancestral source of nutrition. To make matters worse, the sourcing of nuts and oils used in roasting often comes from GMO crops, sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, and glyphosate residues that further impair gut health and detoxification pathways. When you eat these roasted nuts, you're not just ingesting oxidized fats, you're also introducing xenoestrogens, endocrine disruptors, and pesticide metabolites into your system. These compounds can interfere with testosterone production, estrogen balance, and thyroid hormone conversion, all of which are essential for maintaining muscle mass, regulating mood, and burning fat efficiently. The result is a multi-layered assault on your metabolic health, driven by a food that's often marketed as clean, safe, and protein-rich. While many people grab a handful of roasted or flavored nuts thinking they're making a smart, nutrient-dense choice, the truth is that far better alternatives exist. Options that not only avoid the toxic pitfalls of heat-damaged oils, anti-nutrients, and hidden sugars, but also actively support muscle repair, metabolic efficiency, and hormonal balance. The key is understanding that not all nuts are inherently bad. It's the processing, sourcing, and preparation that determine whether they become health-supporting or health-sabotaging. Instead of relying on roasted nuts coated in rancid vegetable oils, smart nutrition begins by shifting to raw, sprouted, organic, or dry-farmed varieties that preserve the integrity of the fats and proteins while enhancing bioavailability. For example, raw almonds or walnuts, when soaked and dehydrated at low temperatures, become far more digestible and nutrient-dense. The soaking process breaks down phytic acid and enzyme inhibitors, making the nutrients more absorbable while also reducing the burden on your digestive system. This one change alone dramatically reduces the oxidative load on your cells, supports your gut health, and helps regulate your body's insulin response, which is essential for anyone trying to preserve or rebuild muscle mass. Another powerful alternative comes from shifting the source of your fats away from PUFA-heavy nuts and toward more saturated fat-rich and monounsaturated-rich options that are far more stable and supportive of metabolic health. Instead of relying on cashews or peanuts, which are both high in omega-6 and prone to mold contamination, incorporating foods like macadamia nuts or Brazil nuts in moderation can provide cleaner anti-inflammatory fats. Macadamias, for instance, are extremely low in omega-6 and high in monounsaturated fats, making them ideal for those following a ketogenic, low-carb, or anti-inflammatory protocol. Their fat structure resists oxidation, meaning they remain stable even when stored for long periods. Brazil nuts, while higher in selenium, are best consumed in small quantities, but their raw, unprocessed form delivers a trace mineral punch that supports thyroid health, testosterone production, and immune resilience, all critical factors in preventing sarcopenia, age muscle loss, and chronic fatigue. When sourcing these alternatives, looking for organic, non-GMO, and unroasted forms is crucial to minimize exposure to glyphosate, pesticides, and endocrine disruptors. For those seeking a crunchy snack with real nutritional value and none of the toxicity, seed-based options like chia seeds, flax seeds, or hemp hearts can offer powerful benefits when used correctly. These aren't typically consumed like traditional nuts, but when blended into smoothies, homemade bars, or sprinkled over salads, they deliver dense amounts of omega-3 fatty acids, fiber, and plant-based protein. Unlike roasted peanuts, which can spike blood sugar and carry aflatoxins, hemp hearts provide a complete amino acid profile and help lower inflammation through their natural gamma-linolenic acid GLA content. The real advantage lies in choosing seeds that have not been roasted or chemically processed, as this preserves the integrity of their beneficial compounds and avoids creating harmful free radicals. For those on a higher fat, muscle preserving plan, particularly those incorporating intermittent fasting or ketogenic diets, better alternatives also include animal-based fats and nutrient-dense snacks that completely bypass the nut category altogether. For example, grass-fed cheese cubes, pasture-raised beef jerky, or boiled eggs with sea salt offer far superior protein profiles, more stable fats, and none of the pitfalls associated with rancid oils or anti-nutrients. These foods are rich in bioavailable B vitamins, zinc, leucine, and fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K2, all of which are absolutely essential for muscle synthesis, hormone production, and mitochondrial health. Unlike flavored or honey-glazed nut mixes, these alternatives stabilize blood sugar, prevent energy crashes, and encourage lean mass retention. And these actual essential foods. Another often overlooked substitute is simply homemade nut butter made from raw, soaked, and dehydrated nuts, something you can control entirely at home. Blending your own almond or macadamia butter in a food processor with a dash of sea salt and maybe a sprinkle of cinnamon gives you a far superior product to what's available in most commercial jars, which often contain canola oil, sugar, emulsifiers, or even hidden trans fats. The beauty of these homemade alternatives is that you preserve the enzymes, natural fatty acid profiles, and eliminate oxidative stress caused by high heat processing. Incorporating sprouted pumpkin seeds is another powerful yet underrated option. They are rich in magnesium, iron, and zinc, support testosterone and growth hormone production, and are especially helpful for people dealing with adrenal fatigue or low energy. Unlike nuts, seeds like pumpkin or sunflower tend to have lower anti-nutrient content, especially when sprouted, and can serve as an excellent muscle-building snack that also supports deep sleep and mental focus. Ultimately, the idea is not to fear all nuts or fats, but to be selective, intentional, and informed. Better alternatives already exist in nature. They just require us to move beyond convenience-based eating and embrace strategic nutrition rooted in food chemistry and physiology. By choosing sprouted, raw, organic options, or even stepping outside the nut category entirely, you can nourish your body in a way that supports lean muscle development, protects your mitochondria, and minimizes inflammation at the cellular level. If you're serious about reversing muscle loss, boosting energy, and aging with strength, these are the kinds of swaps that separate short-term fads from long-term transformation.